Let us pray. Eternal, loving Father, we thank Thee for your Sabbath day. In Jesus' name we come before Thee, thankful hearts that Thou hast in Thy mercy and loving kindness brought us here safely together. We thank Thee for the families, the nations and the countries that are represented here this evening. We thank Thee for the inspired message we just heard. We pray that You'll give us a vision, Lord, this evening, that You'll make clear Your will to us and to Your church. As we study, Lord, this evening in the book of Job, we pray Thy Spirit will teach us, that Thy angels will be here to strengthen us, that we may have a better understanding of Your character and Your love and Your will for it in our lives. Is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. The theme for the camp this year is the law and the gospel. And you know, friends, the gospel, of course, if you wanted to just summarize it in one sentence, it's the method that God uses, or His plan, to save us, to get us to heaven. And He does so through working within the requirements of the law. The law and the gospel work together to get us to heaven. In the Desire of Ages, there's a statement that has always impressed me very much. The message of the Lord says that to know God is to love Him. This is the secret of the gospel. You see, when you truly know God, you'll love Him. When you love God, you'll live for Him. It's not a burden for us to obey or to serve or to do things for those we love. It's a labour of love, it's a joy. When we love God, when we truly know Him, we'll love Him and we'll serve Him. Sin will become hateful to us. What do you think? You know, we're told that we're not to be ignorant of Satan's devices. If to know God is to love Him, if to love God is to overcome, what do you think his device would be? It would be to darken the knowledge of God, so you can't know Him or understand Him properly. To misrepresent Him. If Satan is able to misrepresent God's character, that will affect your relationship, your understanding of God, that will affect how you live. Sister White tells us, one selected messages 156, Satan is determined that men shall not see the love of God. He's determined. Because he knows, when you know God, you love Him. Which led Him to give His only begotten Son. And we know through the Trinity doctrine, He has almost totally obliterated the love of God. But He also, through other areas, friends, He's always working, devising ways where we do not see God properly or understand Him. The study tonight is in the book of Job. There's 42 chapters in the book of Job. And God willing, in 1 hour study, we'll go through the whole book of Job. And we're going to learn things that I'd say possibly many of you here have not learned before or seen before. It was certainly a revelation to me. We're going to see some things about the book of Job that God wants to reveal to us tonight. Deeper things. It's truly an amazing story. The title of the sermon is called The Defender of God. When we talk about the defender of God, we think of many wonderful Bible characters, men who stood for God, for His truth and for His honour. If I was to ask you who this defender of God was, I dare say with many guesses you probably wouldn't pick this person. But tonight we're going to see who it is. And we're going to study some of the words that he spoke. Come with me to Job chapter 1. We know the story. It's a tragic story in many ways. It's a good ending. It's quite an amazing story, and there are many parallels with the last days. Job chapter 1, verse 10 and 11. Satan is speaking to the Lord. It's interesting, actually, the story of Job, that God opens the conversation, not Satan. God says to Satan, "Hast thou considered my servant Job," etc., that there is none like him upon the earth. Now Satan answers and he says, verse 10, "Hast thou not made a hedge around him and about his house and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thy hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. Satan says the only reason Job is the way you say he is because you've blessed him so much. Notice what he says, put forth thine hand. We know what happens, of course. God allowed Satan to afflict Job, his family. And we know what happened in one day. He lost his children. He lost his servants, his cattle, his property. In fact, he lost everything in one day except his wife and, to a degree, his health. And so what happens? Chapter 2, verse 3 to 6. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man? God says this twice about Job. Remember these words. God says he is a perfect and upright man. He says it twice. This will become important later on. He goes on to say, one that feareth God and escheweth evil, and still he holdeth fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. And Satan answered the Lord and said, Skin for skin, yea, all that a man have will he give for his life. Put forth thy hand now. Once again he says to God to put forth your hand. And touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. So the challenge is, the accusation is, Satan keeps insisting. When Job loses everything, he's going to curse you. And God says to him, Behold, he is in thy hand, but save his life. Here we see clearly, friends, that God has sovereignty over the soul. No one can touch you or a hair on your head unless God allows it. And we're going to see from this story, when he allows it, it's for your eternal good and for blessings. So all Job had left was his wife, his health. He's afflicted with boils. He's suffering terrible pain. He's lamenting the loss of his dear children. And he's amidst the ashes, and he's scraping these sores from his body. Now let's read verse 9, and you're going to see why Satan did not destroy his wife. Verse 9. His wife comes to him and she says, Then said his wife unto him, Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Remember what Satan's accusation was? He says, He will curse you to your face. Look what his wife says to him. Curse God and die. He was speaking through her. Now don't misunderstand me. This poor woman lost everything as well. She lost her children. She lost everything. She saw her husband suffering. She didn't have the faith of her husband. But she was able to say to him, curse God. She was able to say the very words of the enemy, friends, to her husband. Sometimes in your walk, even your loved ones won't understand you. And they won't be there to support you. Or your friends. This is what Job experienced. Did Job remain faithful? Let's read verse 10. He said unto her, Thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What, shall we receive good at the hand of God? Shall we not receive evil? In all this, did not Job sin with his lips? He remained faithful, friends. My question is, God knew Job would remain faithful. So why did he permit the trial? Let's find out. This is a lesson for us. In the last days, the saints will lose their prosperity, they'll lose their homes, to some degree their health. They'll lose loved ones, they'll lose friends. But this story is going to encourage them. There was a deeper reason. Desire of Ages, page 21. Notice here. In heaven itself, this law was broken. Sister White speaking about the law of self-sacrificing love, the law that rules heaven. It was broken, and the mystery of iniquity began. Sin originated in self-seeking Lucifer, the covering cherub. Desired to be the first in heaven, he sought to gain control of heavenly beings, to draw them away from their Creator and to win their homage to himself. Notice how he did it. Therefore, he misrepresented God, attributing to him the desire for self-exaltation with his own evil characteristics. He sought to invest the loving Creator. See what he did? He sought to invest or misrepresent God's character with his own evil characteristics. And he succeeded, friends. First he deceived angels, first he deceived men. He led them to doubt the word of God and to distrust his goodness. Remember, to know God is to love him. This is his device, friends. It always has been. If he can get you to doubt God, to doubt his word, to doubt his goodness, he'll succeed. Because God is a God of justice and terrible majesty, Satan caused them to look upon him as a severe and unforgiving. First he drew men to join him in rebellion against God, and a night of woe settled upon the world. You know, in Jeremiah, Babylon was preparing to come and destroy the kingdom of Judah. God sends the prophet Jeremiah to warn them, to plead with them, to submit. And in Jeremiah 9:23, he says these words because the kingdom of Judah was trusting in Egypt for their power. They were trusting in their riches, and they were trusting in the wisdom of their so-called prophets and priests. But God sent this man. The most difficult ministry in the Bible was Jeremiah's. Christ accepted. And he told them, he told the king, he told the people and the princes, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, or the mighty man glory in his might, nor let the rich man glory in his riches, but let him that glorifieth glory in this, that he understandeth and knoweth me. God says, friends, all the power, riches and might in this world mean nothing if you don't understand and know him. That is what we need to seek for, what we need to understand, and then these things cannot happen to us. God allowed the trial on Job because he had to teach Job something about himself. Something Job did not know. Although he was a perfect and upright man, there were some things about his own life, his own character he wasn't aware of. And there was things about God that Job had a wrong understanding of, as we see here. You see, friends, Job and his three friends had a wrong understanding of God, of his character, of his judgments and how he deals with men. Job was considered the wisest man in the land of Uz. By the way, the word Uz, it means to take counsel or to receive advice. That's what the word means. And Job was the wisest man in the land. Let's read chapter 4, verse 3 and 4. Eliphaz is speaking to Job and he says, behold, thou hast instructed many, thou hast strengthened the weak hands. Thy words have upheld him that was falling, and thou hast strengthened the feeble knees. This was a very wise man. He was a wonderful man, a very charitable man. Chapter 29 tells you the things he would do for people. Very godly man. When God says a man is perfect and upright, friends, he doesn't exaggerate. And this man was sought after for advice and from counsel. He was a teacher of God and his ways. Now you have Job's three friends, Eliphaz, Zophar and Bildad. They also are wise men. And they would teach the people about God. So who do you think the devil's going to go after? Who do you think, if he can ensnare with wrong understanding of God and his character? The bitter leaders, the teachers, the wise men. When he ensnares them, friends, then they'll have a wrong understanding to teach to the people. This is what happened in this story. This is truly what this book of Job is about. You know, again in Jeremiah 9, the very next verse, 24, it says, I am the Lord which executeth loving kindness, judgment and righteousness in the earth. In these things I delight. God exercises, friends, judgment, loving kindness and righteousness. But as we're going to see this evening, Job and his friends had a different understanding about God. They were teaching the people that God was ready to punish. And whenever you saw suffering anywhere, it was under the retribution of God and his wrath. Notice how the dialogue will bring this out. Job chapter 2, verse 11 and 13. This is how the dialogue begins. Job is suffering there and he's in pain. Chapter 2, verse 11 to 13. Now when Job's three friends heard of all this evil that was come upon him, they came every one from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamite. For they had made an appointment together to come to mourn with him and to what else? Comfort him. These three brothers come from a long way to comfort Job and to mourn with him. And when they had lifted up their eyes afar off, and knew him not, and never recognized him, how he had become. They lifted up their voice and wept, and they rent every one his mantle and sprinkled dust upon their heads toward heaven. They were so discouraged when they saw their friend, what had happened to him and how he'd become. Verse 13, so they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spake a word unto him, for they saw that his grief was very great. 7 days they sit there, no one speaks. And now after 7 days, Job begins, chapter 3, 1-3. Job begins to speak. Notice what he says. He laments. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed his day. And Job spake and said, let the day perish wherein I was born, and the night in which it was said, there is a man-child conceived. He wished he was never been born. He wished he never had to go through this experience that he was going through now. Verse 11-13. He says, why died I not from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? Verse 13. For now should I have lain still and been quiet. I should have slept. Then had I been at rest. He wishes he had never been, friends. That he never came out of the womb. That he would never go through what he was going through now. And his friends have come to comfort him. Notice what happens now. Eliphaz speaks first, chapter 5 and verse 17. Notice what Eliphaz says, speaking to Job. Behold, happy is the man whom God correcteth. He's telling Job that God's correcting him. Therefore, despise not thou the chastening of the Almighty. He's saying, Job, God's correcting you. He's punishing you, he's chastening you. Don't despise it. You should be happy and take it peaceably. So Eliphaz thought clearly that God was punishing his servant. Job chapter 6, he responds. Notice what Job says. Look how he feels. The words had an effect. Chapter 6, verse 4. For the arrows of the Almighty are within me. The poison whereof drinketh up my spirit. The terrors of God do set themselves in array against me. So he's saying that what he's going through, the arrows of the Almighty, that God has set himself, the terrors of God have set themselves in array against him. Verse 8 and 9. Look what he says now. Oh, that I might have my request, and that God would grant me the thing that I long for. Even that I would please God, that it would please God to destroy me, that he would let loose the hand and cut me off. Again, friends, he's struggling to understand why he's going through what he is. His friends haven't comforted him. In fact, they're telling him that he's being punished, but as he considers and reviews his life, he doesn't know what he's done. But he can't understand why he says, God, the arrows of the Almighty are punishing him. Now look what he says in verse 24. He's speaking to God and he says, teach me, and I will hold my tongue, and cause me to understand where I have heard. He's saying, Lord, what have I done? Show me, teach me, and I'll hold my tongue. But he can't understand it. His friends had come to comfort him, friends. Notice what sort of comfort they are. Eliphaz told him that God was punishing him. He was obviously transgressing somewhere. He was obviously doing something wrong. Now Bildad, chapter 8, verse 1-4. Bildad is speaking now. Then answered Bildad the Shuhite and said, how long wilt thou speak these things? And how long shall the words of thy mouth be like a strong wind? Does God pervert judgment, or does the Almighty pervert justice? He's saying to Job, what do you think? That God's punishing you for nothing? You think God would do a wrong judgment? He's saying, come clean, Job. Stop defending yourself. Look what he says now. It gets worse. Verse 4. If thy children have sinned against him, and he have cast them away for their transgressions. Bildad says to Job, God's killed your children because they were sinners. This man is suffering enough, what he's going through and what he's lost, and his comforting friends have told him that he's being punished for his actions, and his children were destroyed by God because they were sinners. Who do you think was speaking through Bildad, friends? Let's read verse 6. If thou were pure and upright, remember I said earlier to take note, God twice says that Job was a man who was perfect and upright. Twice he said it. Satan didn't like that. Satan hates it when God says that. So look what he gets Bildad to say. Bildad speaking to Job, he says, if you were pure and upright, surely now he would take away for thee and make the habitation of thy righteousness prosperous. He says, if you were pure and upright, this wouldn't be happening to you. God wouldn't do this. You'd be prosperous. Miserable comfort is all right. At a time when he needed his friends, when he truly needed to be comforted, they tell him that God's killed his children because they were sinners, and that God was punishing him because he was not pure and upright. And it had an effect. Chapter 9, verse 17. Job again speaking. Had an effect, all right. For he breaketh me with a tempest, and multiplieth my wounds without cause. He knows he's done nothing wrong, but he says that God is multiplying his wounds. He's breaking forth upon him like a storm, friends. Verse 22 through to 24. Look how low he sings. He says, this one thing, therefore, I said. He destroyeth, notice what he says now, friends. This is Job speaking. He says, God destroyeth the perfect and the wicked. Look what he says now. It gets worse. If the scourge slay suddenly, he will laugh at the trial of the innocent. This is Job speaking, friends. He says, when an innocent person is persecuted and a scourge slays him suddenly, he says, God will laugh at the innocent. Look what he says now. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. Remember these words. Later we're going to see the defender of God, what he says. Here he's hearing this. He doesn't like what he's hearing. Oh boy. Job's going to hear these words again at the end. Job says that God laughs when the innocent suffer. Job says that God destroys the perfect with the wicked. And now he says, verse 24, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked, and he, God, covers the face of the judges. See what he's saying now? There's no justice. The innocent suffer. God laughs, and he makes the judges blind. And now what he says, look what he says now. And if not, who does? Where is he, if not? Because he knows that God is sovereign over all things. He says, if this perversion is happening, and the righteous suffer wrongly, who else can it be but God who allows this to happen? He covering the faces of the judges. He makes them blind. Poor Job repeated the very words of Satan. He says that God destroys the perfect and the wicked. He says that God laughs at the trial of the innocent. He says that God makes the judges blind. And if God didn't, who does? Like God says, I'm the Lord which exerciseth loving kindness, friends. Judgment and righteousness in the earth, for in these things I delight, saith the Lord. Can you begin to see why God permitted this trial now? And see what the problems are? Let's come to chapter 10. Let's read verse 2 and 3. Still Job is speaking here. He's speaking to God. He's asking God some questions. Look what he says. Job 10, chapter 10, verse 2. I will say unto God, do not condemn me. Show me whereof thou contendest with me. Why are you contending with me, he's saying. Verse 3. Is it good unto thee that thou shouldest oppress, that thou shouldest despise the work of thy hands, and shine upon the counsel of the wicked? He's saying, is this fair? That you shine upon the counsel of the wicked and you afflict and oppress your people? How can a man who was perfect and upright come to speak like this? Because of this, friends. When the trials come, you start to doubt. And especially if your friends are not there to support you. This is what happens. That's true. The night of woe certainly settled upon this world. Who is it, friends, that afflicts? Job just said here that God afflicts the innocent and he supports the wicked. Who is it that does that? It's the devil. Do you think God was pleased with these words by his representatives? These are his wise men that are speaking. I don't think so. Chapter 10, verse 8. Job speaking to God, he says, chapter 10, verse 8, thy hands have made me, and fashioned me. Together round about, yet thou dost destroy me. He says, you've made me, you've fashioned me, and you're destroying me. Verse 16 and 17. Look what he says now. For it increaseth, thou huntest me as a fierce lion, and again thou showest thyself marvellous upon me. Thou renewest thy witnesses against me, and increaseth thine indignation upon me. Changes and war are against me. And if that wasn't bad enough, he makes all these accusations against God. He believes God is punishing him as a fierce lion. He's increasing his indignation and his anger toward him. Notice now chapter 11, so far he's going to speak now. Oh, by the way, this type of thoughts, understanding, is from paganism. You see, when you believe that God is punishing the innocent, or when you believe that God is punishing even the wicked sometimes, that he killed Job's children, and all his suffering is because God is punishing the wicked and the upright. This is paganism, friends. This is what Hinduism comes from. You go up to a Hindu who is suffering, you can't help that person because they believe that's their karma. They won't help each other. That's where this stuff comes from. This is what Satan was bringing out here, that God was behind it. The devil's behind these teachings. He slays innocent men and then he attributes that evil work to God, as we read here. How do you think God feels about this? 6,000 years he's been misrepresented like this. His name vilified, lies told about him. And not by his enemies, but by those who were supposed to be his friends, by his people. How would you respond, friends? If you place yourself in God's shoes, how would you respond? Would you, the Bible says that, speaking about Jesus, it says that when he was reviled, he reviled not. And when he suffered, he threatened not. But he committed himself unto him that judgeth righteously. Proverbs 20 verse 3, it says, it's the honour of a man. Let's read that verse together. It's an honour for a man to cease from strife. That's how you respond, friends. To cease from strife. That's the honour of a man. But the fool wants to meddle. So as this is happening, not only in Job's day, but throughout the history of God's people, the history of his church, God counsels us that one day he will be vindicated. And he's vindicated in this story. We're going to see what happens very soon. But there was a lesson here, friends, that God wanted to teach Job and his friends, that he judges righteously. For 6,000 years, God's been misrepresented. His ministers have taught about a never-burning hell, preaching about fire and brimstone. Every time there's a disaster, it's called an act of God. People teach that he creates people as sinners without hope and lost from birth. And every time there's a tragedy, people say, where was God? He always seems to get the blame for it all. Always him that is misrepresented. But friends, God never sleeps nor he slumbers. Every moment he's working to protect, to save, to sustain life. Even to people who mock him and refuse to live for him. He sends angels to protect you. He's always seeking to thwart the plans of the wicked. If we could see the invisible battle that's going on between demonic forces and the heavenly angels, every moment to save, to protect, to sustain life. And yet he gets blamed for everything that happens, even by these wisest men that lived at that time. Come to chapter 11 now. Zophar is speaking. Notice what Zophar says. Verse 1 to 6. Then answered Zophar the Nanamite and said, should not the multitude of words be answered? Speaking about Job and he's defending himself. Should a man full of words talk be justified? Should thy lies make men hold their peace? And when thou mockest, shall no man make thee ashamed? For thou hast said, my doctrine is pure, and I am clean in thine eyes. But oh, that God would speak and open his lips against thee. that he would show thee the secrets of wisdom. Notice what he says now. But they are double to that which is. Know therefore that God exacteth of thee less than thine iniquity deserves. So far tells Job, with all that he's gone through, all that he's lost, that God exacts of him less than he deserves. God didn't even punish him enough. He deserved worse than that. Chapter 13. You know, friends, with all this, with all that he's gone through, all that he's suffering, there's only one thing he's holding to. Let's read verse 15. Job 13 and verse 15. Job says, though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. But I will maintain mine own ways before him. Job says, I'll state my case before him. Even though he slay me, I'll trust in him still. He still trusted in God, but his misunderstanding, he was so confused. He just could not understand why he believed God was doing this to him. Now listen carefully now. Same chapter, chapter 13. Let's read verse 21 through to 24. Again, Job speaking to God, he says, withdraw thy hand far from me, and let not thy dread make me afraid. Then call thou, and I will answer, or let me speak, and answer thou me. Job saying, let me speak, you answer me. How many are my iniquities and sins? Make me to know my transgression and my sin. Why do you hide your face from me? Why do you hold me as your enemy? Job is saying to God, why are you treating me as your enemy? What have I done? Answer my questions. Let me speak to you. Where are you? I can't see you. He feels cut off. Now, friends, when you get to verse 27, you'll notice something very interesting. Look what he says. Thou puttest my feet also in stocks, speaking to God, and lookest narrowly upon all my paths. Thou settest a print upon the heels of my feet. Job says to God, he was in constant fear, friends. He says to God, you're always watching me. Every step that I take, you're watching my paths narrowly. The heels of my feet. Always watching to see what I do so you can punish me. This is what he was saying here. Come back to Job chapter 1 for a moment. Keep your finger there. Job 1 verse 5. You're starting to see now, you're going to start seeing some things about Job, and this is why God permitted the trial. There were some things about Job, as perfect and upright as he was, that was not right about his understanding of God. Look at 1:5. Speaking about Job's children. And it was so, when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning and offered burnt offerings, according to the number of them, that's his children, all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned, and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually. Can you see, friends, that there was this fear? Fear of God, fear for his family. They're feasting, I have to sanctify them, I have to make an offering, I have to pray to God, just in case they've said something wrong. And when Satan took his children, his fears became real to him. Chapter 16, verse 1. 16:1, he calls his friends, he says to them, the second part of the verse, miserable comforters are you all. They certainly were. Verse 7. Again, he's speaking about God, and he says, but now he hath made me weary. Thou hast made me desolate, all my company. God, he's saying, deserted him of all his, desolated him of all his company. Verse 9. He teareth me in his wrath, who hateth me. He's saying that God hates him. He gnashes upon me with his teeth. Look what he says now. My enemy sharpeneth his eyes upon me. This man has gone so far now, friends, to say that God is his enemy, and he sharpeneth his eyes upon him. He's gnashing upon him with his teeth. He's made desolate his family and his friends. How low this poor man had sunk during this trial. I'm not criticizing him, friends, I'm just reading the passages, showing that when you go through the trial of affliction, your faith may not be as pure as gold as you may have thought it was. Chapter 16, verse 12 to 14. Look what he says. I was at ease, but he hath broken me asunder. He have also taken me in my neck and shaken me to pieces and set me up for his mark. You know what that's talking about? Like an archer who sets a target. He said he's taken me by the neck and he's set me up like for target practice. That's what Job is saying about God. His archers compass me round about. He cleaveth my reins asunder and does not spare. He pours out of my gall upon the ground. He breaks me with a breach upon breach. Not even, he's saying, not once. He's punishing me over and over again. He runneth upon me like a giant. He's saying, when are you going to let up, God? Why have you become my enemy? Why are you doing this to me? Verse 20. At least he could have someone to encourage him. He says, my friends scorn me, but my eye poureth out tears unto God. Verse 21. He feels all alone. He feels forsaken of God, despised by his friends. He says, oh, that one might plead for a man with God, as a man pleadeth for his neighbour. Thank God, friends, that we know, if we're to go through a trial as this, that we do have one that pleads our case. Job 19. Let's read verse 6 to 14. Still Job speaking. He says, know now that God have overthrown me and have compassed me with his net. Over and over, friends, the same thing. He says, behold, I cry out of wrong, but I am not heard. I cry aloud, but there is no judgment. He's saying God won't hear me. He's not there. He won't bring proper judgment. He has fenced up my way that I cannot pass, and he has set darkness in my paths. He stripped me of my glory and taken the crown from my head. He has destroyed me on every side. I'm gone. My hope has he removed like a tree. He has also kindled his wrath against me, and he counteth me unto him as one of his enemies. His troops come together and raise up their way against me, and encamp around about my tabernacle. He has put my brethren far from me, and my acquaintance are verily estranged from me. My kinsfolk have failed, and my familiar friends have forgotten me. Verse 19. All my inward friends abhor me, and they whom I loved are turned against me. My bone cleaveth to my skin and to my flesh, and I am escaped with the skin of my teeth. Everything in this world that he had failed him. He wished he'd never lived. He feels there is no one to plead for him. But now, friends, we're going to read some of the most beautiful words ever written in Scripture. With all of this, there's only one thing that he can hold on to. There's only one thing he can cling to. He can see no hope in this life. He can see no hope, no encouragement from his friends. He believes there's no intercessor. But there's one thing he can hold to. One thing he cannot let go. And friends, as a Christian, sometimes you may go through an experience where you feel like Job does here, forsaken even of God and of your friends. But you can hold to this one beautiful promise, friends, some of the most beautiful words ever written. Verse 23, he says, oh, the words he's about to speak, he says, oh, but these words were now written, that they would be printed in a rock, in a book, that they were graven with an iron pen and lead in the rock forever. He says, I wish what I'm about to say could be enshrined in eternity. And this dear man, his wish came true. They certainly were written for eternity. This is the hope that gives every man, friends, every Christian, the hope of the resurrection. Look what he says. I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroyed his body, yet in my flesh shall I see God. Him I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not a stranger. That he held to. That was the only thing the devil couldn't take. He took everything from him. But the hope, that blessed hope, friends, that this life is not forever, and that he will see his God, even when his flesh has been destroyed. The blessed resurrection, when God raises up his people. Come now to chapter 22. Eliphaz is speaking again now. Now he gets very desperate, Eliphaz, because Job, friends, we won't read chapter 29, but if you read it later, Job gives a bit of a resume of the things he did in his life, beautiful things. He was a father to the fatherless. He gave sight to the blind. He helped them who were without. He would counsel and comfort them who were mourn. He's a wonderful, godly man. And his friends knew this, friends. His friends knew this. In fact, Eliphaz said this at the beginning, if you remember, that thou strengtheneth the feeble knees. Look what he says now. You see, when a man holds fast to his integrity, when he says, what have I done? Regardless of the circumstances, his friends are getting more desperate, or I should say the devil is. And so look what they say now. 22, verse 5. Eliphaz speaking to Job, he says, is not thy wickedness great, and thy iniquities infinite? For thou hast taken a pledge from thy brother for naught. Thou hast stripped the naked of their clothing. Friends, this is amazing. These men knew this wasn't true. But they had to find something. So now fabrications come out. Lies are being told. Thou hast not given water to the weary to drink, and thou hast withheld bread from the hungry. Job, of all men. Amazing. Thou hast sent widows away empty, and the arms of the fatherless have been broken. And he says, that's why, therefore snares are round about thee, and sudden fear troubleth thee. That's why darkness that thou canst not see, and abundance of waters cover thee. He says, that's why these things are happening. How do you think Job felt? He knew these things weren't true. Let's read verse 23. Verse 22 and 23. Still Eliphaz is speaking, and he says to him, receive, I pray thee, the law from his mouth, and lay up his words in thy heart. If thou return to the Almighty, thou shalt be built up. But put away iniquity from thee, from thy tabernacles. So they keep insisting that he's doing wrong. He's doing wicked and evil, and that's why he's being punished, and he needs to repent and turn away from it. Then Job answers, chapter 23, verse 3 to 5. Job says, oh, that I knew where I might find him, speaking about God, that I might come even to his seat. He says, I want to come before God. I need to speak to him. Look what he says now in verse 4. I would order my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. He says, if I can get in front of God, boy, have I got some things to say. I've got some very good arguments. I'm going to fill my mouth with words if I can just get in front of his seat and get before him. Verse 5, I would know the words which he would answer me and understand what he would say unto me. And the reason he's saying this, friends, is because he hadn't done anything wrong. He was just being sincere. He wasn't being self-righteous. He was being sincere. We know from the story, we know why it happened. But he didn't notice, his friends didn't notice. Look at verse 11. He says, my foot hath held his steps. His way have I kept and not declined. Neither have I gone back from the commandment of his lips. I have esteemed the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. He just can't understand. Now, friends, the next verse we're going to read in chapter 23 is going to tell you what the problem was. It's going to show you why God permitted this trial. Job begins to really search his heart. He needed this trial in order to find out something about himself. He starts to look at his whole life and his motives, and he realizes something about himself and about his relationship with God. Look what he says. Remember before we read about how he feared for his children? Chapter 23, let's read verse 15. Therefore am I troubled at his presence, at God's presence. He says, when I consider, I am afraid of him. When he looked deeply into his heart, he saw that his relationship with God, friends, was based a little bit also on fear. He says, when I really consider, I am afraid of him. I'm afraid for my family. I'm afraid for myself. Look at chapter 3. Look at chapter 3, verse 25. You see what the problem was? Sometimes your walk with God, yours and mine. No wonder the Bible says, happy is he when trials come upon us. It's only through the trials, through deep searchings of heart, that sometimes we can learn things that we weren't aware of. As David prayed, search thou me and show me my secret faults. Chapter 3, verse 25. Job speaks and he says, look, For the thing which I greatly feared, you see? The thing that he's talking about in the past, the thing that I greatly feared has come upon me. And that which I was afraid is come unto me. See what his life was based on? His walk with God? Fear. The thing that he feared all his life had happened to him. This is why God began the conversation with Satan, because God knew it all. And there was going to be a precious lesson here for Job, for his friends, and for us. There's no fear, Lord, friends, in your walk with God. All he wants for us is good. We're going to see that. There's no fear to be found. He was afraid of God. Let's read back in chapter 23. Verse 16 and 17, look what he says now. For God maketh my heart soft, the Almighty troubleth me. He says, because I was not cut off before the darkness, neither has he covered the darkness from my face. He says, why didn't God cut me off before this trial? Why didn't he let me go to my sleep, to my rest before all these things came upon me? Again, he's questioning God and his providence and his ways of doing things. But God was allowing this for his servant's sake and for us. Bildad speaks again now, chapter 25, verse 4 through to 6. Look what he says to Job, because Job is still proclaiming his integrity and his innocence. And his friends are continually telling him, charging him that he's a sinner, that he's a transgressor, and that he's unrighteous, that he's doing wrong, and he's being punished for it. And Bildad says to him now, chapter 25, 4 to 6, how then can man be justified with God? Or how can he be clean that is born of a woman? Behold, even in the moon, and it shineth not, yea, the stars are not pure in his sight. How much less man that is a worm, and the Son of Man, which is a worm. You see what these men thought about God? How he considers man? That he's a worm? He says that, how can anything be clean that is born of a woman? Some people are teaching that today. How can anything born of a woman be clean, be innocent? Look how Job answers. 26. He's answering directly to those words that Bildad just spoke. That how can anything be clean that is born of a woman? Look how he answers. To whom hast thou uttered these words? And whose spirit came from thee? So whose spirit was coming through Bildad? So whose spirit it was that uttered those words? Job knew. Friends, no matter what his friends would say unto him, he remained steadfast. Chapter 27, verse 5 and 6. He says, God forbid that I should justify you till I die, he says. I will not remove my integrity from me. He says, I'm not going to acknowledge what you're saying. It's not true. I won't remove my integrity. Verse 6, my righteousness I hold fast and will not let it go. My heart shall not reproach me so long as I live. Friends, if your conscience doesn't condemn you, nobody can. If your conscience can condemn you, the whole world can tell you you're right. If your conscience condemns you, friends, the Bible says, by their thoughts, accusing or else excusing one another, in the day when God shall judge the secrets of men. And this man's conscience was clear before God, regardless of what the wisest men on earth were telling him at that time. Friends, in this whole discourse, who is it that's being defamed and dishonoured? It's God. Job believes God's punishing him, although he's done nothing wrong. His friends believe God's punishing him. They believe God brings suffering upon the wicked. And they conclude all his suffering was attributed to God because he was suffering the retribution of God, because he was a sinner. I want you to notice the pattern here. Job began to speak. Then his friends would speak and they would charge him. Then Job would answer. Then they would speak again and Job would answer. Job always speaks last. Always. In the end, they can't answer Job. They cannot confound him. Never. He's the last one to speak every time. By the way, you know what the word Job means? The name? It means persecuted. Now we're introduced to a new speaker. Now we're going to find out who the defender of God is. It wasn't Job. Chapter 32. There's been a young man who has sat quietly for days. This discussion went for days, friends. And he's been listening. And his heart has been boiling. Because this man, he loves God. He's a young man. And he felt it wasn't proper for him to speak as the wise man was speaking. But everything he heard was dishonourable to God and defamed God, and he knew it. And now his blood is boiling, he has a righteous indignation, and he's going to speak. His name is Elihu. You know what Elihu means? My God is he. That's what his name means. This man has a love for his God, and he's jealous for the honour of his God. My God is he. That's what his name is. And he's going to answer now, Job and his friends. And when this man starts speaking, friends, nobody talks anymore. Job doesn't answer anymore. The friends don't answer anymore. No one speaks after Elihu speaks. I want you to notice something very significant. We start in chapter 32, chapter 33, 34, 35, 36, 37. Elihu speaks 6 chapters straight. It's all him, nobody else. All they're doing is listening. And when he's finished speaking, friends, no one says a word. The man whose name is my God is he honours God. He honours his justice and his character. He shows who's behind this misapprehension and darkness. In Job chapter 6, verse 24, Job had said, "Teach me and I will hold my tongue, and cause me to understand where I have erred." By the time Elihu is finished speaking, Job holds his tongue, and he knows where he has erred. That's why God permitted this trial. You know who speaks after Elihu? God. Chapter 38, 39, 40 and 41. Only God speaks after Elihu. Notice something with me before we read some of Elihu's words. Come to chapter 42 for a moment. Last chapter of Job. I want you to notice this with me. Chapter 42. God has finished speaking from this whirlwind, this thunderous voice. He's spoken for quite a period of time. These men have stood trembling at his voice, his presence. Now notice what happens. 7 to 9. And it was so that after the Lord had spoken these words unto Job, the Lord said unto Eliphaz the Temanite, My wrath is kindled against thee and against thy 2 friends, for ye have not spoken of me the thing that is right. Now that's what he says. See what the problem was? Ye have not spoken of me the thing that is right, as my servant Job hath. And he tells them to prepare the bullocks and everything to make a sacrifice. And verse 9, so Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamite went and did according to as the Lord commanded them. Who's missing? Elihu doesn't get rebuked, friends. Those 3 got rebuked. Job got rebuked. And in fact, come back there for a moment. Notice this as well. Verse 6. This is Job. Wherefore I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. Job repented. And so did the other 3 brothers. They all repented. Elihu doesn't repent. Elihu does not get rebuked because he spoke God's words. You know, you may have heard sermons on the book of Job before or read studies. Generally what I've seen in the past, before I did this study, was the brethren say, oh, God never really answered Job. He certainly did. He answered him through one who's called My God is He. He answered him through Elihu. Let's read some of the things Elihu says now. Chapter 32, we're going to read every verse up to verse 21. There's some beautiful things you're going to see now. This man knew the gospel, friends. Chapter 32. So these 3 men ceased to answer Job because he was righteous in his own eyes. They couldn't answer anymore. They couldn't say anything else to Job. Notice what happens now. Then was kindled the wrath of Elihu the son of Barachel, the Buzite, of the kindred of Ram against Job. Was his wrath kindled because he justified himself rather than God? Also against his 3 friends was his wrath kindled because they had not found no answer, and yet had condemned Job. Good point, that one. Now Elihu had waited till Job had spoken, because they were elder than he, When Elihu saw that there was no answer in the mouth of these 3 men, then his wrath was kindled. And Elihu the son of Barachel the Buzite answered and said, I am young, and ye are very old. Wherefore I was afraid, and thus not show you my opinion. I said, days should speak, and multitude of years should teach wisdom. But there is a spirit in man, and the inspiration of the Almighty giveth them understanding. Great men are not always wise, neither do the aged understand judgment. Therefore I said, hearken to me, I also will show you my opinion. Behold, I waited for your words, I gave ear to your reasons, why ye searched out what to say. Yea, I attended unto you, and behold, there was none of you that convinced Job, or that answered his words. Lest ye should say, we have found out wisdom, God thrusteth down, not man. Now he hath not directed his words against me, neither will I answer him with your speeches. He's saying Job hasn't directed his words toward me. I haven't said anything yet. His words have been directed toward you. And he says, and I'm not going to answer him according to the arguments that you guys used. Now, notice now verse 15. They were amazed. They answered no more. They left off speaking. They were not able to answer Job anymore. And he says in verse 16, when I had waited, for they spake not, but stood still, and answered no more, I said, I will answer also my part. I will show my opinion, for I am full of matter. The spirit within me constraineth me. He could not keep quiet any longer, friends. He was constrained. He says, behold, my belly is as wine which has no vent. It is ready to burst like new bottles. Can you see how he just could not hold back any longer? He had to share what he knew about God and his truth and his character. Like wine bursting out of new bottles. He says, I will speak that I may be refreshed. I will open my lips and answer. Look what he says now. Let me not, I pray you, accept any man's person. Neither let me give flattering titles unto man. Very important text, this one. In time of a crisis, friends, you don't take sides. Elihu is saying here, I don't accept any man's person. I'm not siding with anybody. I'm not going to flatter anybody. At a time in a crisis, you don't accept any man's persons, nor do you flatter anyone. You stand for God's truth. The Bible says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. It's the kisses of an enemy that are deceitful. So he wasn't siding with anybody. He was just going to stand for God and his truth, and he was going to let them all have it. Chapter 33. This is a really beautiful passage. Elihu is speaking to Job. He addresses Job first. Look what he says now. He was paying very close attention to what Job had been saying. Verse 8. Surely thou hast spoken to my hearing, and I have heard the voice of thy words. He said, Job, I heard what you said. Verse 9, you said, I am clean without transgression. I am innocent. Neither is there iniquity in me. Verse 10, you said, behold, he findeth occasions against me. He said, Job, I heard you say that you count God as your enemy. Verse 11, you also said this, he putteth my feet in stocks and marketh all my paths. Behold, in this thou art not just. I will answer thee. He said, Job, that was wrong what you said. He says, I'm going to answer you. Don't you know that God is greater than man? You see the problem, friends? People want to reason about God the way we reason about each other. God is greater than man. We should uphold him on another level altogether. The awesome and terrible God, we should reverence him. Not bring him down to our level of reasoning. Now let's read now. Job had said that God wouldn't answer him. Look at verse 13. Elihu was repeating Job's words. He said, why dost thou strive against him? For he giveth not account for any of his matters. Elihu is saying, that's not true. Why do you say that God does not give account for his matters? Why do you say that God does not speak? It's not true. Verse 14. Elihu says, well, God speaketh. He certainly does. Once, yea, twice. But it's man that perceiveth not. Man doesn't want to listen. God does speak. He's speaking to you right now, Job. Verse 14. Verse 15, sorry. This is a really beautiful passage now. In a dream and a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon the men, in slumberings upon their bed. Sometimes that's the only time God can speak to you. We're so busy. So finally, when you fall upon your bed, finally He may have an opportunity to speak to you. Verse 16, then, remember what Job was saying, God won't hear me, He's cut me off. Then He openeth the ears of men. That's when God opens the ears of men and seeks to instruct them. Verse 17, why does He do so? That He may withdraw man from his purpose and hide pride from man. He tries to show us our errors and our faults and our pride, proud. He tries to speak to us and open our ears, friends. Verse 18, that's not all He does. He keepeth back his soul from the pit and his life from perishing by the sword. These brethren were saying that God was punishing with His arrows, with the sword, with His armies. Elihu says, that's not the God I know. He's working constantly to save life, to protect us, to keep us from death. And you know, friends, even with all this, what Elihu was saying, most of the time people don't listen. They're indifferent to it all. God pleads with us our whole life, but people don't respond. And so you know what God does? He waits. What else can He do? He waits. He keeps you alive. He protects you. And He waits for an opportunity when finally His words may pierce through to the soul. He waits for some circumstances where maybe you may be ready to receive some light. Look what happens now. 19 through to 22. This is speaking about the man who won't listen to God even when God tries to wake him, to speak to him, to guide him. He won't listen. Look what he says. Verse 19. He is chastened also with pain upon his bed, and the multitude of his bones with strong pain. The man gets sick. He gets so sick that his life abhors bread and his soul dainty meat. Verse 21, his flesh is consumed away that it cannot be seen, and his bones that were not seen stick out. This man is dying. Very close. Those of you who have worked with people who get very sick and die, you know what this is. Description is very, very good. It's very clear. I've experienced this just recently. Someone who, as much as they believed in God, never wanted to acknowledge Him or listen to Him. Until I saw the bones sticking out of their face and I saw this text. Now they were ready to listen. And God waits for that. He still doesn't give up. Look what happens now. Verse 22, yea, his soul draweth near to the grave, and his life, that the man's about to die. God, finally, now I have an opportunity. Maybe now I can get through to him or to her. Verse 23, it's a beautiful text. If there be a messenger with him, that word messenger, it's an angel. If there be an angel with him, an interpreter, one among 1,000, to show unto man his uprightness. He says, now we have an opportunity now. He sends an angel. Listen to this translation. Yet if there is an angel at their side, a messenger, one out of 1,000, sent to tell them how to be upright, God finally finds an opportunity to speak to that soul. He sends an angel to be by the side. Verse 24, and the man's ready to listen now. Then God is gracious unto him and saith, He commands the angel and He says, deliver him from going down to the pit. I have found a ransom. That word, friends, in the margin is an atonement. God waited to the last moment of your life even, pleading with you all your life, protecting you. You could have died 1,000 times. And He waited till your life was just about finished. And finally you're ready to listen. And even then He wants to save you. And He lifts you up, restores you to health. And He says, deliver him, for I have found the ransom. Someone to pay for that life. This young man knew the gospel, friends. He knew that God does everything in His power to deliver and save man. Exact opposite of what the others were saying. God strives with man and He pleads with him. He protects him. He commands angels to watch over them. He teaches them to help us to be upright. And then He commands the angels to deliver them, because I have found an atonement. How can we understand His grace? His infinite love toward us. Ephesians 4:7, it says, unto every one of us is given grace. How much grace? According to the measure of the gift of Christ. Godhead believers should understand better than anybody the gift of Christ. For God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten Son. Can you measure that? Can that be measured? It's infinite, friends. The Bible says that's how much grace you're given. The grace God gives you is compared to the gift of His Son. It's immeasurable, it's infinite. The reason you're lost is because you reject the grace. Elihu was standing for God's truth, for His honour, and what He does in saving man at every moment. Let's read verse 25 through to 29. The man's restored to health. His flesh shall be fresher than a child's. He shall return to the days of his youth. He shall pray unto God, and He shall be favourable unto him. He shall see His face with joy. This was a man who was about to die and be eternally lost, renewed in health. And now he has something to live for. Thankful to God. He will render unto man his righteousness. Verse 27, He looketh upon men, and if any say, I have sinned and perverted that which was right, and it profiteth me not, He will deliver his soul from going into the pit, and his life shall see the light. Look what He says now. Lo, all these things worketh God oftentimes with man. Repeatedly, friends. Opposite to what they were teaching. God cuts you off, that God punishes you. God's striving, He works with you all your life to save you. Does all He can to save you. He works with man oftentimes this way. Verse 30, to bring back his soul from the pit, to be enlightened with the light of the living. Mark well, O Job, hearken unto me, hold thy peace, and I will speak. If thou hast anything to say, answer me, speak, for I desire to justify thee. If not, hearken unto me, and hold thy peace, and I shall teach thee wisdom. Now Elihu's going to speak to all of them. Chapter 34, 10 to 12. He's addressing the four of them now, and he says, therefore hearken unto me, ye men of understanding. Far be it from God that He should do wickedness. That's what that was saying. And from the Almighty that He should commit iniquity. For the work of a man shall He render unto him, and every man to find according to his ways. Friends, it's cause to effect. That's sowing and reaping. He says when things happen to you, it's not necessarily God punishing you. You're reaping what you sow. God renders unto a man the work of that man's hands. And every man to find according to his own ways. Verse 12, yea, surely God will not do wickedly, neither will the Almighty pervert judgment, like they were saying. Chapter 36 now. Verse 6 and 7. He preserveth not the life of the wicked. Exact opposite to what Job had said. Job said that He preserves the wicked and He afflicts the innocent. Elihu says, no, He preserves not the life of the wicked, but gives life to the poor, giveth right to the poor. Verse 7, He withdraweth not His eyes from the righteous. Verse 15, He delivereth the poor in his affliction, and opened their ears in oppression. See what he was combating, friends? See what he was answering? The very things that were being spoken unjustly about God, misrepresenting God. He heard everything they had said, and he had held, and he was bursting out now to defend God's honour. Verse 22, Behold, God exalteth by His power, who teacheth like Him? Who has enjoined Him His way? Or who can say, Thou hast wrought iniquity? Who's going to say to God, You've done wrong? That's what that was saying. That's what Job was saying. Look what he says now, verse 24. Remember that thou magnify His work, which men behold. He says, remember, you're to praise God's work. Because men are beholding, men are watching. You have to bring glory to God before the world. Not falsely accuse and misrepresent Him. Chapter 37. Verse 14 to 18, he says a few things now about God's power and creation. Very similar to the very things that God is about to say now. Chapter 37, 14 to 18. Hearken unto this, O Job, stand still and consider the wondrous works of God. Dost thou know when God disposed them and caused the light of his cloud to shine? Dost thou know the balancing of the clouds, the wondrous works of him which is perfect in knowledge? How thy garments are warm when he quieteth the earth by the soul of the south wind? Hast thou with him spread out the sky, which is strong, and as a molten looking glass? In other words, he's saying to Job, you've got to really think about what you've been saying about God. Look at verse 23. This really summarises everything Elihu wanted to say. In fact, this is the last thing he says. And this summarises the whole book of Job. Touching the Almighty, we cannot find him out. He is excellent in power and in judgment and in plenty of justice. Friends, God is perfect in justice and in judgment. He will not afflict. That's what the whole book of Job was about. Falsely accusing God of punishing the righteous and even the wicked, afflicting those where God's only trying to save and to help and to restore. God is excellent in judgment and justice, and he will not afflict. Chapter 38. Now God is about to speak. As I said before, Elihu finished speaking, nobody said a word. They were convicted, friends. Now chapter 38, God is going to speak himself. Do you think God was pleased with the things that have been discussed, the things that were said about him? You know how many words God speaks here, friends? 1,986 words. I calculated that would be at least 20 minutes that God speaks. He speaks from a whirlwind. This is not a still small voice that speaks now. God was not happy about what was being said. He particularly wasn't happy because they were the wisest men, supposedly at that time, to teach about God and his righteousness. And the devil had been able to darken God's character, misrepresent him. Thank God that Elihu was there. God's character had been questioned, his justice questions. They said that he makes the judges blind. They said that he was always watching, ready to punish the disobedient. He wasn't pleased, friends. False doctrines defame him, they make millions doubting infidels. We know from the doctrines that have been taught over the years, Sister White says that many have been made infidels, even though they were good men that taught them. How do you think God feels when his very ministers are defaming him at the pulpit? Elihu was the only one that defended God's name. He said God is excellent in judgment and justice. He does not afflict. The first angel's message, friends, is to fear God and give glory to him. That word, to fear God, doesn't just mean to keep his commandments. It means to hold him in awe. It says in the book of Joshua, when Israel crossed the Jordan, that Israel looked at Joshua and they feared him all the days of his life as they feared Moses. It means to hold someone with such awe and respect and reverence. The sort of things we've been reading here, do not hold God in awe. They bring doubts, rightfully bring doubts. So the message in the last days is going to be one that will remove anything at all, in any way, misrepresents God and his character. 18:1, Revelation. The whole earth is lightened with his glory, with that message. Sister White speaking about that time, and she says, the darkness of misapprehension is going to be swept away, friends. Very soon, a message from God is to be proclaimed, illuminating in its influence and saving in its power. Notice what this message is going to do. His character is to be made known. Into the darkness of the world is to be shed the light of his glory, the light of his goodness, mercy and truth. Notice how God answers now, chapter 38, verse 1. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, out of a whirlwind, mind you. In other words, God wanted to make an impact here. He wanted them to really... These men were trembling at his presence. Look what he says. Who is it that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Why are you obscuring and misrepresenting my ways? Why are you darkening my words? Remember, Job had said that God was his enemy and was destroying him, and that if he could see God, he would have many questions that needed to be answered. Well, God's speaking now, friends. He speaks nearly 2,000 words with a thundering voice out of a whirlwind. How do you think Job and his friends feel at this time? Do you think they're ready to give arguments? They would have struggled to actually stay on their feet. Look what God says now in verse 3. Gird up now thy loins like a man. Stand up like a man, that's what he's saying. I have some questions and you answer. God's got some questions now to ask. Verse 4. Remember what Elihu had said to him? Verse 18, the previous chapter, hast thou with him spread out the sky? Were you there, Job, when God spread out the sky? Look what God says to him. Verse 4, chapter 38. Where was thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Where were you when I created the earth, Job? Declare, if thou hast understanding. You're a wise man, declare. Verse 12. Hast thou commanded the morning since thy days, and caused the dayspring to know his place? He says, Job, when have you ever commanded the dawning of one day? You know what that means, the dawning of one day, how beautiful that is. Every day, friends, that dawns, every time the sun rises, every morning, that's a new day. Souls are going to be saved that day. Every day brings hope. Every day but you take another breath, and if you're not right with God, or your loved ones are not right with God, every day that sun rises is another day, another opportunity. He says to Job, hast thou commanded the dawning of one day? Verse 18. Hast thou perceived the breadth of the earth? Declare if thou knowest it all. Can you measure how the breadth of the earth, Job? 22 and 23. Hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow, or hast thou seen the treasures of the hail, which I have reserved against the time of trouble? And we know what that's about. 25 to 28, God's still speaking. He says, hast thou divided the water course for the overflowing of waters, or a way for the lightning of thunder, to cause it to rain on the earth where no man is, on the wilderness wherein there is no man, to satisfy the desolate and waste ground, and to cause the bud, the tender herb, to spring forth? Hath the rain a father, or who have begotten the drops of dew? He's saying, Job, can you understand these things? Can you explain them? Chapter 38 now, verse 31 and 32. He talks about the great wonders in the universe. Can thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Can thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season, or can thou guide Arcturus, a wonderful, amazing planet Arcturus, travelling at an amazing speed? Can you guide Arcturus with his sons? Can you control the stars and planets in their orbit, Job? Verse 36, have you put wisdom in the inward parts? Who has given understanding to the heart? Verse 39, will thou hunt the prey for the lion, or fill the appetite of the young ones? Do you provide food for the lions? I want you to notice, friends, what God's getting at here. Verse 41, who provides for the raven and his food? When his young ones cry unto God, they wonder for lack of meat. God's thoughts even toward young birds in the nest, crying to God for food. You think God's going to forget you? God's talking about the lions, friends, and ravens. Can a woman forget her sucking child? They may forget, yet I will not forget thee. The Lord says, I've engraven thee upon the palms of my hands. Chapter 39, he speaks about the hawk, verse 26. Does the hawk fly by thy wisdom, and stretch her wings toward the south? Does the eagle mount up at thy commandment, and make her nest up high? Now God, chapter 40, he says to Job, moreover the Lord answered Job and said, shall he that contendeth with the Almighty instruct him? He's saying, Job, why do you contend with me? Why do you question me? You can't instruct me, you can't answer these questions. He that reproveth God, let him answer. He says, Job, you reproved me repeatedly. Answer now. You've been waiting for your opportunity. Answer. Job's been waiting, friends. He desired to talk with God. He had many questions. He said he had many arguments ready. You know what Elihu said to Job? We forgot to read earlier, chapter 37:20. When Job said like that, Elihu said, I'm not going to ask to speak with God. That man had a much better understanding of God. Job answers now. His opportunity comes. He got what he wished for. He got to be in the presence of God before his very seat. Chapter 40, 3-5. Job answered the Lord and said, Behold, this is what he says, I am vile. What shall I answer thee? I will lay my hand upon my mouth. What happened to all his arguments, all his questions? I'm going to lay my hand upon my mouth. Once have I spoken, but I will not answer. Yea, twice, but I will proceed no further. God says to him, verse 7, Gird up thy loins now like a man, I will demand of thee, and declare thou unto me. Wilt thou also disannul my judgment? Wilt thou condemn me, that thou mayest be righteous? Some people will go so far to make sure that they're right, that they are righteous, that they'll condemn God through his word. Chapter 42, he speaks about Leviathan and Behemoth and these great beasts. Friends, in all this, what God was talking about was, the message he was trying to get through to Job. The seas and the changing of the tides, the stars and the planets in their orbit that God controls. He controls the showers of the heaven. What are the showers for, by the way? Showers are blessings for us, to provide us with food. God commands the dawning of each new day that gives us hope and life. God provides food for the young lions and for the raven and their young ones. He gives wisdom and understanding. He's the one that controls the great beast. What God was telling Job and us is that he is in control. He's always in control, regardless of what you see is happening, regardless of what was happening to Job, God was in control. He was telling Job, remember Job thought God was forsook him, that God was nowhere there, he couldn't talk to him, he couldn't find him anymore. I wish I could come into my presence. God is saying, Job, I've always been there. I feel for the young ones of the ravens who cry to me for food, let alone you. I provide for the lions. I control the planetary movements in the great universe. Now it says in the Psalms, when David looked up into the heavens and the wonders of God's creation, he looked upon this earth and upon humanity, the speck in the universe, and he said, what is man that thou art mindful of him? God is more mindful of us, friends, than anything in his creation. That's what God was telling Job. He said, I haven't forgotten you, Job. Nothing can happen God does not allow. He controls the sea and the rain, the planets. He provides and he protects. He's in control, friends. All the wonders of the universe. He says to Job, why do you doubt me? Why do you question me? When you were being blessed, when you were more prosperous than any other man, Job, you didn't doubt my love then. Now the blessing's removed. Suddenly God's my enemy. God is slaying me. The arrows of the Almighty pierce me. You see, the problem was with Job? There was self-righteousness there as well, friends. When things were going well, God was his all. His family were well, he was prosperous. When that was all removed, and this is what the devil had sought to do, and to a degree, until now he had succeeded. When the blessing was there, things were fine. When they were removed, even a man like Job began to question God. He called God his enemy. He said that God was afflicting him. The devil had succeeded in getting Job and his friends to question God. But friends, Job understood. When God had shared this with him, he understood that all things work together. Look how he answers God now. Chapter 42, 1-3. Then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that thou canst do everything, and that no thought can be withheld from thee. Who is he that hideth counsel without knowledge? He says, therefore have I uttered that I understood not. Things too wonderful for me, which I knew not. He says in verse 5, I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye seeth thee. Wherefore I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. If ever a man lived who was just in standing before God and questioning God because of what he'd been through, it was this man. Possibly the greatest trial any man had ever gone through. And yet when he had his opportunity, friends, when God spoke to him from that whirlwind, when he realized that God was always with him, always in control, he says, I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. He had nothing more to say. He realized where the problem was. Today, friends, God is being misrepresented by his people as he was then. Knowledgeable people who know how to speak, just like Job and his wise friends. And he's waiting to see who's going to stand for him, for his honor, who's going to give him glory. God is waiting like he was then for someone to take a stand. Someone like Elihu, friends, who's jealous of God and his truth. Someone whose name, like Elihu, means my God is he. That's what God is waiting for today. Elihu stood for him then, and God is waiting today that once again those will stand for him and declare his righteousness, his character of love and justice and righteousness, and how he works to save men. Even from the womb, before you're even born, thou coverest me from the womb. This is why God allowed the trial in Job's life. Job found out things about himself that he was not aware, and without the trial he would never have been aware. He realized that he was afraid of God, that he had this constant fear of losing the things that were dear to him. But after this trial, friends, he knew that God was truly in control, no matter what would happen. And the book of Job is written for us, especially in the last days, where we will go through similar, even worse experiences. But God is telling us, like he told Job, that he's in control. As he guides all things in the universe, he's watching over us. And nothing can happen to us that he will not allow. And he sends his angels to deliver us and to keep us. Let us pray. Our loving Father, in Jesus' name, we thank thee for thy word. We thank thee for the story of Job. We thank thee how he trusted in thee, regardless of what happened to him. We thank thee, Lord, that there are lessons to be learned that can encourage and strengthen us today. Help us to say with Job that we can trust in thee no matter what happens. Help us to know, Lord, that you are truly in control. And even if our friends forsake us, turn against us, if our loved ones turn against us, help us, like Elihu, to stand for thee, to declare your righteousness at this time to a perishing world, to remove the darkness of misapprehension that is covering this earth, that this true message from heaven may come and shine upon thy people, that the light of your glory may truly cover the whole earth, is our prayer. Please keep us, Lord, throughout this camp, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.